Thanks for joining us on the show, diving headfirst into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Vice President JD Vance in our state today, and he's making headlines in Metro Detroit. He says the Trump administration is ready to send the National Guard to Detroit. All Governor Whitmer needs to do is ask. We're taking a closer look at those comments and why Mayor Mike Duggan says it's simply not necessary, and giving you reaction tonight from our viewers just like you. We're also keeping the conversation going about how to cool the rhetoric after a gunman shot and killed conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Oakland University history professor James Noss with how political discussions can keep going on college campuses respectfully. And social media guru Ethan Lloyd on the responsibility of all of us to downplay the rhetoric and how we can avoid seeing all of it. But we begin in Howell, where Vice President Vance visited this manufacturing plant today and held a rally after. He talked about the tax cuts in President Trump's budget bill and how he says the administration is boosting American manufacturing while also paying tribute to Charlie Kirk, something he did while he was in Howell today. But Vance also brought up the possibility of National Guard troops moving to Detroit to fight crime, like what happened in D.C. And it's being discussed in Chicago, perhaps Memphis. He said all they're waiting for is one thing.
My one message to Gretchen Whitmer is, look, the city of Detroit we know has got some serious crime problems, and we know that it's the people in Detroit who suffer the most when crime is allowed to run rampant all over city streets. Gretchen, we are happy to send the National Guard to Detroit, Michigan. All you got to do is ask. We got to remember, the streets are safer when law enforcement is allowed to put the bad guys away. And just as we want to protect your job and we want to make sure you have a good wage when you work hard, we also want to make sure when you go home, you can enjoy your neighborhood and enjoy your community and safety.
Now, this is something we brought up right here in Studio C with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan just a short time ago when he was on The Pulse. We asked him about the possibility, and he said, simply put, it's not needed.
When the new U.S. attorney for the Trump administration came in May, he said, what do you need? And I said, we have these groups of teenagers in these beefs like we've never seen. U.S. Attorney Gorgon got several more prosecutors from the Justice Department, got us help from ATF and DEA. We just had a raid 2 weeks ago where we hit 11 houses of suspected gang members, got 43 illegal weapons out, and we're seeing things quiet down. So what we have today is an effective partnership with the Trump Justice Department because we talk with each other.
We should point out, according to Neighborhood Scout, a site that collects crime data from around the country using police departments and the FBI, important, using the police department and the FBI, according to that site, Detroit's violent crime rate is still 4 times higher than the national average. Now to the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. A day after the accused gunman was charged, we're turning our focus to where Kirk spent a lot of his time: college campuses. We've always heard how colleges are supposed to be places where you're exposed to different ideas, but that's also supposed to be done respectfully. And we talk about how campuses can move forward. We're joined now by Oakland University history professor James Noss. And Professor, it's good to see you. Always good to have you here on The Pulse. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So when you first heard about what happened to Charlie Kirk, you and I talked for a little while and on text, and you said something that I think was very important. You said, under no circumstances is there a way that anyone should condone what happened here. This was abhorrent, disgusting, and evil.
Absolutely.
And it also takes away something very special for all of us. What is that?
It is. If you think about what we do for a living at universities, you know, a lot of people, even some people inside universities, say, well, we help kids get jobs. But I think it's more fundamental than that. If you look at, you know, those seals that nobody looks at that have Latin writing, what they say are things like, at my university in Oakland, it says to seek virtue and truth. If you look at Harvard, it just says veritas, truth. And the way we get at truth is by putting all the ideas on the field, and even the ones we don't like, even the ones we like, and trying to get at the best one and pushing them together and seeing, you know, how those ideas mesh with one another, and we get closer to knowledge and truth. You'll be surprised to hear a professor say this, but none of us actually knows everything. And so we have to have all those ideas that are out there. So when you talk about a violent attack, it really, an attack on one person chills everybody because it silences all of us.
Yeah, there's dissenting views, and just because you don't like the views of somebody, right, you may even believe that the views that the person is expressing, that they aren't true. You can actually feel that and believe that, but that doesn't make it false. by saying that. And so you're saying we need to include all voices, even those we don't like. We've seen this in recent years. Talk for a moment about protests where unpopular voices have been allowed on campus.
Yeah, I think we've seen this, there's a long heritage of this in the American university system back to the very beginning. Certainly, I mean, you and I have talked before about the pro-Palestine protests that happened not too long ago. Now we're seeing sort of a similar version of that, but I think with the roles reversed, where we have, Pam Bondi speaking today about wanting to enforce hate crime legislation when as a conservative attorney general, when the conservatives traditionally were pushing back against that idea, when the same argument were being made by the left in the campus protests.
It's interesting because when the shoe's on the other foot, you see liberals and conservatives kind of eating crow in a moment because of what they said in the past. But the bottom line is, if we want to find one universal truth in America, perhaps, and I'm being virtuous by saying that, but for a moment, that truth should be that we all are allowed and permitted to have dissenting views, and we should be able to speak those words without fear of being harmed. Is that not the essence of our democracy?
Absolutely. I would also just say that, freedom of speech, which we all take for granted, I think we all think it's always going to be here, is actually, of all the rights that are guaranteed us, it's the one that makes the least sense. For most of human history, that was never a thing. Censorship and suppression in the name of safety and protecting people were. In some sense, that's the natural order of things logically. To endorse free speech is to endorse hearing uncomfortable bad things. So why would we want to do that? And the reason we want to do it is because we want to get at something bigger. We think there's a bigger reward towards sort of being put in uncomfortable situations.
I recall at Michigan State University some 30 years ago being in some of the halls where people were brought in as guest speakers, authors of books that said things that seemed at the time that were just vile and terrible, according to many people in the room, but they were still allowed to be there. People screamed back. They asked questions, but there was the discourse, right?
Absolutely. And to me, the question we have to ask right now is what do universities do now? Because I think we've reached an inflection point. We've had somebody killed for exercising free speech. So where do we go from here?
Where do you go from here?
Well, I wish I had the answers. I think there's two possibilities, and I don't think we know the answer yet. This morning in the New York Times, there was an excellent op-ed by the president of Barnard College, and she says this moment calls for more uncomfortable speech. So she's doubling down on the commitment to free speech. I hope that's the direction we go. You're also starting to see some troubling news, though, coming out of schools in, I think, Tennessee and South Carolina, where you're seeing faculty and staff who are being fired for voicing what I think are abhorrent views about Charlie Kirk, and people are saying things like he deserved this, which I think is an abhorrent view. But it's troubling to me that universities are cracking down on that because it's protected speech.
It is protected speech, and I know that the rule has to be that, okay, even if it's considered hate speech, it's protected, right? I know your president of the university has sat on this set and talked about, even as a Jewish woman, she said that what is said on the campus 8 months ago, 10 months ago about Israel is permitted by way of the Constitution. However, when you condone violent behavior, is there a soft spot there where we're questioning now whether or not you're going to then promote violent behavior?
Well, so certainly if you promote violent behavior, we have laws against this. I mean, free speech is not an unlimited thing, and this has been widely argued in the Supreme Court, and we have pretty solid laws. But it's a very narrow band of things that are limited. I would say that one of the ways forward is for people to commit to the value of free speech and to try and separate that from their own political beliefs. So the time you need to endorse it most is when you feel the most uncomfortable. So if you're a conservative now who feels like things that are being said about Charlie Kirk are uncomfortable, I hear you, but you need to endorse the value. If you're a liberal at some point and the things you hear are making you uncomfortable, you need to divorce from your political belief and endorse the value of speech.
Man, we got to get uncomfortable in order to move forward, and being uncomfortable means hearing things that you don't want to hear, and unfortunately, that wasn't followed in this case. And of course, you think about how terrible it was what happened. Anybody who condones that is not welcome on this glass table, because killing anybody for what they believe is simply wrong in this country. And I want to thank you, Professor Nas, for joining us here.
Thank you.
What a great conversation. We appreciate having you here.
Thanks so much.
We're turning back to the Vice President's comments, offering to send the National Guard to the Motor City. Detroit City Council member Mary Waters and former Police Chief Ralph Godbee weigh in next. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about Vice President Vance's comment about bringing the National Guard to Detroit if the governor should ask. City Council member Mary Waters and former Detroit Police Chief Ralph Godbee. And it's so good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here on The Pulse. And in case you're just joining us, here's the comment that we're talking about.
My one message to Gretchen Whitmer is, look, the city of Detroit we know has got some serious crime problems, and we know that it's the people in Detroit who suffer the most when crime is allowed to run rampant all over city streets. Gretchen, we are happy to send the National Guard to Detroit, Michigan. All you got to do is ask.
Did not reference Mayor Mike Duggan. He didn't. He referenced Governor Whitmer, but nonetheless, this man, the mayor of Detroit, says, hey, this is my response. In 2024, Detroit's law enforcement strategy produced record declines and resulted in the fewest homicide, shootings, and carjackings since 1965. He goes on to talk about what happened in 2025, experiencing a further 15% drop in homicides. Talks about a drop in shootings, carjackings, all record lows. The mayor, obviously, at this point, does not believe that there's any need for this. Former Police Chief Ralph Godbee, Councilwoman, good to see you both. What do you think when you see VP Vance say that to Whitmer, the governor? What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think what he meant was that he understands concretely he doesn't have the legal authority to send the National Guard here. So he veils it in an invitation because it's dubious what he said because the governor already controls the National Guard. So if there was a need, Mike Duggan and Gretchen Whitmer, they could sit down and work that out. But I would be vehemently against that. In July of 1967, my mother and father were standing on a bus top on Rosa Parks when the civil unrest broke out. The National Guard were here. So I was raised to understand that that's not the place for the National Guard in everyday policing, and particularly when there's no civil unrest, there's no urgent situation that the local police department shouldn't be able to handle.
Councilwoman, obviously we have crime issues across the country that happen in big cities, and we know that that's nothing new. At what point do you think the president or the vice president has a point in saying that crime is out of control? At what point would you say it's out of control?
When there's an insurrection, just as it was January 6th, that's when crime will be out of control. You know, this administration is targeting black cities, majority black cities. And yes, we have the highest poverty rate since 2017 in the city of Detroit, and that was in the Detroit News. However, we need the president to assist us with poverty. What are the root causes of poverty? That is why the crime rate might be up, even though it's down right now. Those are the kinds of things we need. Jobs, schools that work, housing, decent housing. When you address those, when people have a decent job that they can go to, now you're going to see the crime rate drop even lower.
I find the National Guard to be applied to some of these crime issues to be an interesting conundrum or an interesting proposition, because we know, and again, I've mentioned this on this program before, but the first time that I ever saw the National Guard work together with the city was when I was in New Orleans and I was covering the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. There was martial law that was called, and at the time, Governor Blanco, God rest her soul, said, hey, we need some help.
Right.
And there came the National Guard, and they did help. What would the National Guard do in a city like Memphis or Chicago or Detroit if there is a crime problem that they see? What would be their role?
Well, it would simply be for visibility because there's no active law enforcement measures they could take. But what concerns me, and this is where Democrats in urban cities have to be a little bit more forthright about crime, because Trump is painting them in a corner. Because if you say no to the help and things go up, you're kind of screwed. And this is another point that I don't want people to miss. With the National Guard, we've worked with the National Guard before. I've Super Bowl, All-Star game. It is not aberrant. What's aberrant is a president trying to impose his will upon a city where it's not needed. And then another thing we have to stop doing is playing with numbers. To say Detroit has the lowest crime rate since 1965 is blatantly a lie, because so you're talking about 2/3 less population. That's why Detroit is still number 1, number 2 in violent crime. because the violent crimes per 100,000 residents, Detroit is #2 in the country.
I think about businesses. They sit there and they frame numbers a million different ways. You know, if there's a potato chip bag company that's competing with another one, they'll say we did the best in 25 to 54-year-olds that go to Walgreens, and the other person says, no, we're #1 because of this. But the crime numbers, who suffers by this at the end, Councilwoman?
But you know, Rube, this president won't allow us to leave the Dred Scott era. That is what's happening with Black America, where a Dred Scott decision said what? It said black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. And that is what's happening. He is targeting black communities. So if he wants to declare war, help us, Mr. President, declare war on poverty. Help us to declare war on schools that don't work. We need jobs. Those are the kinds of things. That is the help that we need.
The root cause of so many of the issues,
The root cause
right?
of poverty. Give people a decent job. I can assure you, crime will decrease.
Absolutely.
I remember Bill Bonds, remember the old Channel 7, then Channel 2 anchor, came to our high school in 1993 and told a group of mostly white students, if you grew up poor and black in America, would you end up in the same position in life had you grown up in the suburbs? And that question, he said, don't answer it, but answer your thing. That's an indelible question. Here's the bottom line. There are institutional issues that need to be solved.
Yes.
We know that. And you're saying that we need to get to the root of those problems, not just use it with a bandage,
We need to get to the root of those causes. And we don't want the president to say that black people are expendable and that they're killable. We don't want that. We don't need that. We are going backwards in this country. America, wake up.
And Rupert, if I can say this, going back to your analogy about who gets hurt and all of this, when we play with the numbers, going to your potato chip analogy, the citizens get hurt.
Yeah.
Because the lived experience of people on Mack and Bewick, Linwood and Philadelphia, Joy Road, Plymouth, their lived experience is not a reduction in crime, because nobody says, well, oh, wow, numbers are down. I feel 50% safer than I did.
But what about...
So when you play with those numbers, you're playing with people's lives.
And you're right, people don't feel safer. They don't. The bars still exist on the doors and on the windows. But once we address poverty, I do believe that it will help.
But I do have to ask one last question. I have a short minute left here. But Mayor Mike Duggan sat on this desk and he basically said that, look, thanks to the Trump administration's help with the U.S. Attorney, Grogan, we have the tools that we need, the federal prosecutors, the ATF. Isn't that a piece of the puzzle that's needed?
I don't like the fact that this president, first of all, is ignoring the Constitution. The man doesn't have no respect for the Constitution in this country.
But is the U.S. Attorney helping, and is that a tool that people need to remember when they're talking about fighting crime?
It is one tool of many, but the biggest, and I will quote the late Joanne Watson, the biggest deterrent to crime is a job.
Is it that? I agree with
I want to thank you both for joining us. We're out of time. Ralph Godbee, Councilwoman Mary Waters, thank you both for your perspective here on The Pulse tonight. We're actually turning our attention back to the assassination of Charlie Kirk after the break. But from a social media perspective, what is our role in stopping hate speech, and how can we avoid even seeing it? You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. It is people, power, and politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Here to talk about how to clamp down on hate speech on social media and how we can avoid it, social media expert Ethan Lloyd. And it's so good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you as usual. You know, I put the phone down for the purpose of broadcasting, and I suddenly go, where's my phone? Where's my phone? It's a feeling that we have where we're addicted to these things. And the reason we're addicted isn't just because we want to see who texted us. It's because we're looking at Facebook, X, heck, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, it's all on here, TikTok, and boom, we go through the rabbit hole, and we're only going to be there for a minute, and what happens? 20 minutes pass, an hour passes, and your day kind of goes by. How addictive is this?
Listen, Root, my screen time is embarrassing. I got it so bad that sometimes I'll reach in my pocket and I'll think my phone is ringing and my phone isn't even in my pocket. Like
you're feeling for it.
Yeah, like and so it's really crazy. People are spending a lot of time on their phones. Some people are doing positive things, trying to work. Other people are using that time to spread hate, do things that are unnecessary on social media.
I find it interesting because social media is such a confusing place sometimes.
Yeah.
If I go look at pictures of my niece and my nephew and my brother and sister who live out of town, and I get caught up in that, the next post happens to be something else, which could be a divisive post. The algorithm wants us to get into a room where we're going to beat some people up and be beat up ourselves. Is that true? The algorithm, does it call for that kind of engagement?
Well, I think that what we need to know is that our social media platforms, what we see is volatile. We're seeing the best and the worst of everything. So we are seeing what is engaged with most. We aren't seeing the best of what's engaged with most, or the happiest of what's engaged with most, or the most positive. We're just seeing what people are talking about the most. They can be talking about anything. There are no parameters in place to stop anything negative on social media.
I posted on my social media today, new VP offers Governor Whitmer help with National Guard in Detroit. Offer still stands, he tells the governor. We're taking a deep dive on the Pulse at 11:30.
Right.
Already 34 comments, and boom, there it goes. And it just keeps on going. What is it about the algorithm that it senses that I'm posting about news, or is it the word troops? Is it like, how does it work?
So there have been instances in the past on Meta platforms where they were flagging and looking for words and making sure that that was suppressed. Mark Zuckerberg contributed that to pressure from the Biden administration. We don't see that happening as much. He went on a whole press run about it. But what we are seeing is the same old issues on social media, which is the fact that if I leave a comment or if I post something with a buzzword, people will leave comments. The algorithm, the AI, the data sees that and shows it to more people organically. This is not, you didn't pay for that to be boosted and get all those comments. You just organically did that. There were buzzwords in there. You mentioned the governor, you mentioned the vice president. All of that instills something in people, and it invokes a reaction.
So is it the chicken or the egg? Are you saying that when I post something about Governor Whitmer and troops and VP or Trump, President Trump, when it sees those words, does it feed it to more people? Or is it that people are seeing it and then it notices that people are engaging and feeds it to more people because of that?
It's both, but the biggest thing is that the easiest way for people to understand it is to think about our conversations in topics. Certain topics, they know that you want to say something about it. So they know who has something to say about the governor, who has something to say about the political scene. So they're pushing that to those people.
So it feeds it to the people who have commented on those things already.
Absolutely. It's
That's
just spiraling like that, yeah.
What advice do you have in the minute that we have left to people at home to tone down the temperature?
Take a moment. I mean, if you have to log off. Take a moment. We are seeing a lot of content. It is a binging process. Binging is not good no matter what it is. So just take a moment, log off if you have to.
Get off the junk food for a few minutes. Not a bad piece of advice. Ethan Lloyd, thanks for joining us here on The Pulse. Always great to see you. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was great to be with you.